and welcome to Crafts and Crime. I'm Amy.
I'm Elaine.
And today, as always, we have a craft for you and a crime for you.
Yay, I did my homework.
Yeah, she worked hard. I mean, we both did.
It was a long week.
It was a long week.
It was long emotionally. The weather was kind of gross at the end, and that was a bummer because we couldn't finish what we wanted outside.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, we did your chicken run.
Chicken run.
Yeah, the big one. That was kind of fun. It's the second one because mine is like half the size of yours. So we already kind of knew from putting together mine what to do. But it was just twice as big.
Yeah.
And with heavier chicken wire.
Yes.
Mine was like the
more
cheap plastic.
scratchier.
Yeah. And heavy. Man, that roll was heavy. But we got it done. Just me and you.
Yeah, we did it.
Hooray.
But yeah. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, yeah.
That's
We're
the day we're recording.
Yeah, on Cinco de Mayo.
I can't wait to hear the poppin' neighborhood tonight.
I know. And then watch the one year that nothing happens.
Even though my husband has to sleep for work tomorrow. But he sleeps. He just
sleeps through like everything. Yeah. So our neighborhood, we do, my neighbors, I think, celebrate Cinco de Mayo every year. They usually have a big party. I'm wondering if the lady behind you is going to do a big,
I know.
she did on Easter, like a big party. So we'll see. It'll be fun.
The weather's a little grody. I'm wondering if that's going to tone it down.
I don't know. Better than hot.
That's very true.
Yeah. So we'll see once people start getting off work and coming home.
Yeah, it's early.
It's early when we are recording. So I saw something cool that I wanted to share. I didn't even tell you this. I was on Facebook and there was this funny article and I guess it started last week. Someone posted on Facebook, nobody I know. It was like a BuzzFeed article I saw. It happened in New Jersey and like this person posted piles of pasta that were just dumped along like a riverbank. Or basin or whatever.
What?
It was like more
dry pasta or cooked pasta?
It was cooked. What? And it was like 500 pounds of pasta.
Oh, that's a shame.
All like, look, all on
spaghetti monsters. Yes. Oh my god.
It was
creepy.
all over the place, like all lined up along this like river basin. Okay. And so they're like, who's dumping cooked pasta? And then they find out that it was like a military veteran getting rid of his mom's stockpile of food after her death.
Oh.
Yeah, so she just stockpiled a bunch of food, and so I'm like, but why would you cook it? Unless
maybe he was feeding like the wildlife. At least something could take it.
I don't know.
It would eventually break down. Really? Get out of my head.
Well, does it break down faster when it's cooked? Do you think? Because there's water in it.
At least something could eat it. It would mold and fungi.
True.
And then, because if it was dry, there's not a ton of creatures that really like get into it. It would
dry
take a
noodles.
while, like weevils.
I'm wondering if it was just all like, I mean, it looked from the picture like a bunch of spaghetti noodles. But I'm like, was it ramen noodles?
They looked pretty not.
But it was cooked.
Little
it's like, could you imagine carrying all this pasta? Like, what do I do with it?
Probably
I'm just
in
gonna
garbage
dump it
bags, I bet.
Still, it's so weird. We tend to say the same things a lot at the same exact time. But this is very similar to what you hear on Mommy's After Hours. So if you like hearing us finish each other's sentences and laughing, then head on over to Patreon and follow us. But anyways, do you just want to get into your craft then?
Funny. Yeah.
I'm like, that's all I had to share was some noodles.
That's funny. No, I love it.
I'm like, clearly I love all the starches, bread and noodles. And I know.
Okay. So I am actually going to do a little multiple part series. So this is what can be expected for the next few weeks of releases. And the first is going to be paper.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of love the thought of this because doing the research, y'all, it's a lot. It really is a lot.
I know. And when we were talking, like, we'll just talk about crafts, but I'm learning as I'm researching.
I really am too.
Yeah.
Really
and it's like
fun.
all the stuff that we're interested in, but now it's like we get to
really in depth.
Yeah, really get into it.
And it I don't know why paper has been used literally throughout time and history. Writing has been done.
Yeah.
And so as early as possible, we found a way, and it's really going to be a cool little thing. This is going to be a lot of timeline, and I'm sorry, but we're literally talking about, it was so well documented.
Oh, that's nice.
So in my sources, I will have a really great timeline that you can look at decade by decade since like 4000 BC.
Oh, wow.
If you want to do that, but it's intense. Okay, so the word paper comes from the papyrus plant in Egypt, and it started around 4000 BC. They started making it, it looks like it's very similar to a palm mixed with a grass. So it's a really thick, reedy stem with like a big palm frond on the top, and they would rip the stems apart and rip the fibers from the middle and lay these sheets out like you're doing paper placemat weaving when you were a kid with construction paper. So you crisscross it over, you do one direction then another direction, and in between each layer they would pound it together with a mallet. See, just like gold beading.
Oh, I know, I was just thinking that,
yeah, exactly. They're pounding it down with a mallet, and then they do another layer and they pound it, and it was amazing, and it worked really, really well. But over time those layers did separate, and you can see that in museum specimens and exhibits, that it's really rough on the edges, and it does tend to start to separate in those layers. In 200 BC, the first parchment paper is showing up, and that is the skins of goat, sheep, calves. I talked about this in gold beading as well.
Yeah.
And this process, I didn't really go into it much, is a heating, boiling, scraping. They scrape it down over and over so delicately to the point that it is a tanned, thin, crinkly, malleable sheet. It's not parchment like we use for baking. It was much different, but it could be rolled up, and so that was commonly used all the way through medieval times as well.
Yeah, I think weren't like some of the scrolls, was that parchment? Or
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In about 105 AD, we have a little better history of some paper. A man named Cai-Lun, he was a eunuch, and he worked for the emperor, and one of his jobs was basically like as a stenographer, and they would write on giant bamboo boards, and they would carry around them in like a wagon, and he was pulling them, and he drops them, and basically he's pissed because this is his job all the time. And so as inventions happen, who knows how we make it up, he decides he's going to grab a ton of fibery materials. He gathers up silk rags, bamboo leaves, parts of fishing nets, and he just starts boiling them. And in this process, he boils them, which is the process of maceration. And he would take out all these chunks, and he just ended up beating them together into this sheet of paper. It was not the very first time this had ever been done, but his was the most efficient. So he made this process really efficient. He was celebrated, and he became basically part of the royal court, and everybody loved him. But really, sadly, it only lasted for about a year. A new emperor came into reign, and because he changed the ways, this dude wanted to have him arrested.
What?
Which would have led to his execution. I know, it's crazy.
That makes no
it's
sense.
It's not documented
paper
super well, right? A better form
type
of paper.
Yeah.
So jealousy is a strange thing, let me tell you. So for some reason, I don't know why they even wanted to do that. It's still just something that's going to bother me. But he gets into a nice cozy bathtub and he poisons himself.
Oh no!
And so that was the end of Cai-Lun. So thanks to him, because he did some cool stuff with paper. So now we're going to move forward quite a bit, and at this point paper hasn't changed very much. In about 500 AD now, Mayans have started, this is evidence that Mayans have made paper from tree bark. And this was another thing that was super common. We've been writing on stuff for forever. Tree bark, palm leaves, everything,
even
walls.
Like, yeah, I was going to say like cave paintings.
There was always a way. In 751, the Arabic people have learned to make paper from some Chinese that they had taken prisoner. Because these secrets were so well guarded, they weren't shared. It was such a rare thing. The paper making skills were passed down, and it was kept very secret. So it was a way that they were able to find out.
Wasn't that kind of the same thing like with silk?
Oh, I'm sure.
Like, yeah, just a lot
all
of
of these trades ended up becoming so precious. They're precious commodities because they,
because if you had it, then you could trade it, and nobody else
Exactly.
knows how to make it. So that
And
makes
it
sense.
becomes you monopolized it.
Mhm.
In 868, the earliest printed book was called the Diamond Sutra by Wang Xie and was a 16-foot long scroll.
Oh, wow.
I can only imagine how long that would take to make a piece of paper that
I
long.
know.
That's crazy. In 875, China has invented toilet paper.
Oh, I'm not even thinking paper like toilet paper.
Exactly, but can you imagine?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Just wiping your butt with leaves.
Ugh.
In 969, China has now made paper playing cards. So
I thought you were going to say paper plates.
In 1035, we have moved on, and there is a written journal entry from a man named Nasiri Khosrow in Cairo, and he was traveling, and he sees, this just makes me laugh, we've always loved food, paper packaging wrapped around street vendor food.
Okay.
So we've always been trying to keep our hands clean.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's funny, it's always been people selling food and wrapping stuff up in napkins. In 1151, paper is being manufactured in Europe. Now, this is crazy because this was something they had started to do when they moved on from parchment.
Okay.
They wanted it to be very bright and crisp. If you were rich, you had white paper. And
it's kind of like the bread. If you're rich, you got the white bread.
And this is what ties in a little bit as well to your when you were talking about spinning. So they would use linen cloth because, back then, as it is still today, linen is made from plant fibers, and it was, spun together and made tiny. They weaved it into fabric. So it is still cellulose plant fibers. So they would take the linen and they would boil it and water macerate it and pound it out, and they made paper.
That's crazy.
Yes. And so this was also a continuation of when, money was made of paper. And back in the day, paper would have, it's really funny because a little fact would be, they would be like beard hairs and stuff in the paper.
Yeah.
Because people were spinning these vats of boiling hot water.
So other beard hairs falling in.
And so the richer you were, the less beard hairs there were, I guess, in your beautiful white paper, because that meant your linen, you had money enough to have bright white linen, which was processed the purest. I say a lot. In 1495, the first paper mill in England by John Tate was owned, and paper is being manufactured the same way, made of linen, but they have started to add in other plant materials, but it is mostly linen, and they would actually buy up people's old fabric to make paper. So it was like early recycling. So once your stuff was too ratty, you sold it, and that was what people would have, something called a rag bag in their house. It was like old ratty stuff. You put it all together so you could sell your linens as recyclable material. You probably got paid nothing for it.
Probably.
In 1690, the first paper mill in the United States was in Germantown, Pennsylvania, by a man named William Rittenhouse. And something he did was he donated his paper for gun wadding during the American Revolution. So for those that don't know, today it is still used. There's wadding, but it's a different kind. But back in the day, it took a really long time to reload a bullet. You had to put the black powder in, you had to put your little bearing ball of whatever kind inside, and then you had to jam it down.
Yeah, like you
had to jam it down with the wadding to keep that in place. And also that worked as an extra projectile. So it's kind of interesting. Here we go. was trying to keep track of our notes.
I know, it's hard.
My
It's hard when
brain
we were
is
like
on
looking at each
one.
other and
It
then
is.
yeah.
So 1798 in France, Nicolas Louis Robert invented a paper machine. And this was, if you know what an old ringing dryer looks like. So it's
like
a
with the
pasta
rollers?
machine. Here we go with the pasta machine. Gold beating. We're getting back into it.
Yeah.
And so the paper manufacturing process was the same exact way. And at this point, this is going to be in another topic I'm covering too, so I haven't gotten into a ton of it. But they made screens, and these screens would sift this product. I didn't explain that properly. That's okay. These screens would sift the product. They'd pack it down, pull it out, flip it. And there was your sheet of paper.
Yeah.
So this process was exactly the same, only it managed this long, continuous piece of mesh that would dunk in the water, scoop up the pulped material, and then ring it through these ringers.
Oh, to like roll it, push it.
The ringers were heated to dry it in the same process and scroll out a long, continuous strip
I was about
of
to
paper.
say, before we got to the heated rollers, I was like, is it like the paper making kit we got for the girls?
Yes, but it is. It is. And it's exactly the same as it is in that little kit. It's just a frame with a piece of screen. A piece of screen. In 1804, the first book is printed on machine paper, and it's Andrew Wilson's The Abstract of Christian Religion. And I will have a picture of that.
Oh,
of the book. In 1806, just a little bit after, in England, the Fordrinays made an upgraded version. This is also what sucks about inventions. They made an upgraded, better version of Nicholas's paper machine, but it was so expensive because in 1806 it cost them $600,000.
Wow, that's a lot.
It bankrupt them because it was
like, what's that in today's money?
Oh my God, I'm sorry, I don't even know, but it's probably more in the range of like a few $100 million. It's a serious amount of money. In 1844, paper is now starting to be made from tree trunks. This is like this is a baby thing.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. You drive to the coast, there's paper mills everywhere. It's the fart smell. If you don't know what it smells like, it's like sulfur egg farts mixed with Elmer's glue. Because glue is part of the process now.
Yeah.
And I'll get into that.
I only grew up near a water treatment plant, and we'd pass by it every time. Like, it was on our way to church on the freeway. We'd always be like, who farted?
Oh my
And then
gosh.
like, then you eventually learn like that smell. And now my kids, go into my parents' house, they know that smell because we have to drive past it to get to their house.
See,
yeah,
everybody has some kind of weird smell factory. So the way that this is done is, if you've ever seen a tree being sawed up, the chunks of tree, they chip it away. It's called the chipping process. Imagine mulch. They just mulch it up and then they chop it up, and they water macerated it the same way. But it was not a really great fine textured paper. It was pretty lumpy. And just 10 years later, they learned to extract those cellulose fibers using caustic sodas, and they'd boil it at a really high temperature. And those caustic sodas, it's still the same thing they do now. And we're talking caustic sodas like soda ash from lye and products like that.
Okay.
Sodiums do it. And this would essentially dissolve with chemical extraction. It would dissolve what we know to be like sawdust, and it would leave behind the cellulose, which is really strong, and it would mat together as they pound it, and it just became strong. And they would add glue. They used animal glues in the day, and it smelled really terrible.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because that's really it. It has not changed that much. The only difference is that these paper machines that we have nowadays are just on an extreme massive scale, but it's the exact same way. And I know this wasn't the best explanation ever, but it's intense. It was way more than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. But I have a couple fun little paper fact doodads.
Oh, yay. I like a fun fact.
I do too. And I think I do really good on a trivia show. So a tree trunk is actually called a bola. B-O-L-E. Bowl.
A bowl.
Bowl. And in chemistry, they call the cellulose fibers linear polysaccharides.
Polysaccharides.
And that immediately makes me think of lined sugar. I don't know why, but the oldest surviving piece of papyrus paper is from 2200 BC.
Wow.
And the oldest scrap of paper, as we essentially know it to be, as in the pounded fibered paper, was unearthed in the Fangmatan in Gansu province. It was part of a map, probably is what they think. It's writing. I can post that picture too.
Oh yeah.
And it was dated to about 141 to 179 BC.
Wow.
And I mean, if I knew those kinds of characters, it's legible. It's crazy. So yeah,
that's so cool.
Paper.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy when they find like ancient scrolls and stuff, and or just even like the oldest, like you said, that's like, I'm not doing math, but that's a long time ago.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really
is. It's crazy,
such a
like
long
what
time ago.
even now with paper, and all the trees. And okay, so it kind of made me think of when we had that tree that was cut down on our street. That woke us up, all of us,
God,
because like
terrible. It sounded like it crashed into the house.
Oh, it did. And it was at like 8 a.m, and like I was awake, I was in bed, and my husband was sleeping because he's working a weird schedule, and you just hear it like bang on the ground, and everyone got scared, and my husband bolts up, like it sounded like something hit our house, and I was like, no,
it vibrated everything.
Yeah, I was like, no, it's okay, it's just the tree trimmers. They're cutting down the tree across the street. And so he's like, okay. It took him a little while to go back to sleep. But yeah, my oldest, he was like, man, that scared me. And yeah, but I know they like, it was funny because they chop it up, they chip it, and, chop it. I couldn't think of the word. And so I was telling Jack, I was like, oh, they were going to put it in the thing, like the chopper. He's like, the what? I'm like, the chopper. He's like, the chopper.
Get to the chopper.
And he was like, come on, you know what it's called? I hate it when he does that. But I'm like, just tell me, what is it? He's like, it's a wood chipper.
The wood chipper.
And I'm like,
so close.
I was so close. But I know because I got a chip drop. What was it, like 2 years ago? I will never do that again because it's like an arborist, whoever is cutting down all the trees, they chip the wood, so it's like mulch, but it's everything. It's all the leaves or all the pine needles, all of that, and that's where we got all those big logs, because we put like, sure, we'll get logs and mulch. And it covered the entire driveway, like the length of our house. It was,
oh my God, which is crazy. We have really long driveways.
Yeah, and it took us forever to get rid of it.
That sucks.
I was posting
people
free
pick it up.
mulch, yeah. And that's how I met one of my friends. She came and picked up free mulch.
See, hashtag gardeners
I know,
are friends.
I wouldn't do it ever again, but I met a friend that way. And so she came with her husband and kids, and they got some free mulch, and we had just had some baby bunnies. And so I was like, you want to come see? So her and her daughter came in the back and saw some new baby bunnies, and we started talking, and was like, oh, I homeschool too, and blah blah blah, and we're like, oh my gosh, let's connect. And then it turns out she's friends with one of my other friends, and they've been friends for like forever. It's so weird. But back to my original thought was like chipping all that wood and stuff. I'm like, now we just I don't know what they do with it. Do they drop it off?
Yeah, I don't know either. But I do know that it's really funny because I found out that our green recycle bin, the
green one?
Yes, our green recycle bin, the ones that we technically pay for as part of our, like, I'm not sure how it works in other states, but here we have like our trash and sewer, but they're like, sometimes they're together and sometimes they're not, and I just learned they're not, but so I don't pay that, but it does cost different amounts per bin, and we are giving them free things to sell. They recycle all of our greenery stuff, and then they sell it as mulch.
So
but they
weird.
do also use it in like the the anti-erosion walls when they're planting those really beautiful flowers like on the side of the freeway, because they do it for erosion management. They do use it there too, but it's like we're paying to, like, here, you take this and sell it.
Yeah, that's so weird.
You get rid of it for me. We're paying for them to get rid of it, but they make a profit off our garbage.
That is so weird. And then Jack was just saying that our recycling doesn't even get recycled, which I'm like, I recycle. I'm really good about it.
Anybody in San Bernardino County,
which is a huge county.
Yeah. Something's not going on right.
I know. But, I mean, what can you do?
We're literally the biggest county in the entire world. Oh, my gosh. In the entire United States.
Oh, are we?
Yes.
Oh, I've lived here my whole life, and I don't even know that
it's the largest.
fact.
Yeah.
I forget that fact.
The amount of people that live in this county outnumber the amount of people in the state of Oregon.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us.
Yep. So it's massive.
Yeah. Well.
Boy, sorry, everybody. That was a weird tangent.
I know. And it started off with mulch.
paper
and
to mulch to like.
Because I thought of like all that wood. I'm like, do they take that to like a paper place?
Welcome to our brains.
I know.
Again, this is your
it all
free.
Came full circle.
It does. And this is your free Mommy's After Hours preview.
Exactly. Oh, well, I'm going to bring us down.
Yeah, I'm going to settle in now.
Sorry, I know. I got to bring it there. But, one of us has to make us all sad. At least once a week. At least we trade off for now.
Exactly.
But,
okay. I'm ready.
Okay. So, my case is about some fires that happened in Florida.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
So, on August, sorry, I'm pulling my microphone. Let me get situated. Okay. Start over.
I say okay a lot.
Yeah. So, on August 7th, 1993, all of this is going to occur in 1993. Okay. Just keep that in mind. So, we were like barely 5, if that, like in elementary school.
No, I was about to turn 5.
Oh, yeah, August 7th. Okay, I was already 5, I think. I can't do math today. Okay, so on August 7th, 1993, at 4:34 a.m., a 911 call came in for a house fire in Spring Hill, which is located in Hernando County, Florida. So firefighters put out the blaze and entered the home. And detectives were immediately called when firefighters found human remains of one person inside the home. Ooh. The remains were of 80-year-old widow Sophia Garrity.
Oh.
She was found in her bedroom on her bed, and the entire room was scorched. And she was like so badly burned. There was like barely anything left of her remains. And I watched this show called Cold Blood. It's on Discovery Plus. That's where a lot of my stuff comes from. But the detective was saying that like it just seemed like there was just a torso and a head. Like there was like barely anything left of legs and arms.
That a fire can burn at like crematorium level.
Yeah, her whole house was ablaze. So there was like, the only way that they were able to immediately tell it was her, other than it was her home, was that she still had her crucifix around her neck, and she like never took it off, so they knew it was her. She like wasn't even the type of person to have enemies, so they're like, what happened here? She like had just moved to Spring Hill, Florida from New Jersey just a few years prior, so she
trying to get warm and cozy.
Yeah, she's retired, and and a lot of the people on her street were retirees just like her, and I think a lot of people in that area as well. A lot of people moved to Florida where it's warm.
Yeah.
She was known as the cookie lady by all her neighbors because she would make cookies and give them to the neighborhood kids. So she was just a really sweet lady. Yeah. She 80 years old and living alone and just sweet lady. So detectives investigated the scene like they would, any other crime scene. But there really wasn't a lot of evidence to go off of because the fire and then all the water to put out the fire. So it just basically washes everything away. However, they did find a screen like in the spare bedroom had been removed from the window and it was propped up by the bed.
Oh.
And then there was a jewelry box found just outside of that window. Oh, rude. So it was like, was this a robbery gone wrong or whatever?
Weird.
An arson dog. I don't know.
That's so weird.
Maybe
they forgot it or like in the hurry of like, okay. So
I have no idea, but it's weird. So they're like, what is going on here? They also brought in an arson dog to try to check for accelerants, and they did. Like the dog noted on one area, but it really wasn't a whole lot, so not a lot to go off of. So with these like pieces of evidence, they decided to like scour the neighborhood and talk to the neighbors and to like find any leads.
Mm-hmm.
And it only took him a couple hours for them to be led to one suspect, 29-year-old Edwin Mike Caprat. Now, Mike's, they always called him Mike, but Caprat is his real first name. Even on the show, they kept referring to him as Mike Caprat, but I'm just going to call him Edwin because that's his name.
Okay.
And that's like what all the articles kind of, you know, when you search him up, that's what you're going to find. Mm-hmm. So anyways, Edwin lived across the street from Sophia Garrity. And he had actually dated her granddaughter at one point. So he had been in Sophia's house before. And so detectives talked to him and they noticed that he had like a fresh cut on his foot. So I thought that was weird. But they didn't really have a whole lot to, you know, bring him in and all of that. It was just like they're just doing their rounds, you know, trying to, okay, let's check in on this guy and let's look into him further. So after looking into him a little more, they find out that he had been arrested in Tampa earlier that year in connection to a murder and robbery. Yes. So it looks like we got our guy, but he was only convicted of using the dead man's credit card, and he was given 2 years of house arrest for that crime. So not connected to the murder, just like he used the guy's card. I think the other guy with him like did the murder. I have no idea. I didn't look into that a whole lot, but just he has a criminal past.
Yeah.
So, you know, it looks like we got our guy. We're gonna bring him in, but then the very next day, fire investigators revealed a trail of fire from her bed to an electrical outlet. So the fire was deemed an electrical fire and not arson.
Oh.
And Sophia Garrity's case was closed.
Oh.
Just 10 days later, on August 17th, 1993, at 1:10 a.m., another fire erupted at a house on Spring Hill Drive. The neighbor stated he could hear a man inside yelling for help and for someone to call 911. Firefighters arrived at the scene, put out the blaze, just like the last time. And once again, detectives were called when firefighters discovered two people inside. An elderly woman was found battered behind the front door, and an elderly male was found in the hallway.
Oh my gosh.
Miraculously, they were both still alive, though.
Oh, yay.
So firefighters were able to take them out of the house, and they were rushed to the hospital. They were identified as 84-year-old William Whitney and his wife, 83-year-old Alice Whitney. And their son was called and told, like, you know, his parents had been attacked in their home. Their house was set on fire, and that, you know, you need to go to the hospital. They're in the hospital, you know, fighting for their lives.
They're so old. That's so sad.
I know. And he was older, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, in their 80s.
He was probably in his late 50s.
And he talks on that show, and he just says, you know, it was awful to see his parents bloody, and they were covered in like sand and dirt from being carried out of the house by the firefighters. And he was like,
the pain of a burn. Just I've never had a really, really terrible one, but I've had enough that sucked. I can't imagine it being that. It never stops. Your nerves are just screaming.
Yeah. So, and they were beaten. They were, so it wasn't just fire. It was, they were
insult
attacked.
To injury.
Yeah. So detectives start to piece together what had happened. So Alice had been attacked in the living room. She was hit multiple times in the back of the head, and then William was attacked in the hallway. And then the drapes were set on fire in a clear attempt to, you know, cover up the crime. In the hospital, Alice starts to recover. So she's getting better. However, she had advanced Alzheimer's and wasn't able to tell the detectives what happened at all, which I guess is good. She doesn't remember.
That's true. So she doesn't have to remember that event either.
Yeah, or who knows what she remembers. But so she wasn't able to help at all. And then sadly, William fell into a coma and never regained consciousness and passed away. So detectives are thinking that all these fires, you know, have to be related. And obviously, like, they've had to be done by the same person. The MO is the same, you know. So they start looking for leads and scour Hernando County for anyone willing to talk. And, you know, like all counties, they have their fair share of crime, you know. And detectives are just hoping to find someone who will point them in the right direction. Unfortunately, only less than 24 hours and only 8 miles away in Brookridge, Florida, like 8 miles away from the last
fire.
one. A call came in at 2 a.m. that there was a mobile home on fire. So once again,
oh my gosh,
firefighters,
it's so small. Like you can't escape that fast. It's gonna. Oh my gosh.
I know. So they, firefighters put out the blaze, and upon entering the home, they found human remains of one person. This was the home of 72-year-old Ruth Goldsmith.
These
they
elderly
knew it had to be her.
people.
Yeah. Just 2 years prior, Ruth had retired as a clerk, issuing fishing and hunting licenses, and moved to Brookridge from Pennsylvania. And sadly, Ruth was so badly burned that they couldn't tell how she had died. And once again, because there was a fire, and firefighters, their main goal is put the fire out, everything was burned or washed away.
Yeah.
So any physical evidence possible is just gone. And like all the other victims, like you said, they're all old.
Yeah.
And
defenseless on top of that. The worst kind of defenseless.
Exactly. And so detectives are starting to, piece it together, because this is the third home that's been set on fire with elderly inside.
There can be a couple coincidences that are awful, but like, come on now.
Exactly. So Sergeant Mark Rivenbark was working the case and interviewed Ruth's best friend, Lydia Rydell. Obviously, Lydia was distraught, over the loss of her best friend. She told Sergeant Rivenbark that she and Ruth were very involved in their church. And of course, she's like, I don't know who would do this to her. Once again, there's like no immediate cause of the fire other than a trail that led away from an electrical outlet.
Oh my gosh.
So once again, arson investigators ruled it as an electrical fire and not arson. So her case was closed. Just like Sophia Garrity.
That sucks.
Yeah. The only reason why the second fire wasn't closed was because there was an attack.
Right.
So they knew. But this is like, they can't tell how either of these women died.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah. So there really was like no link to connect all of them other than the fact that they're all old and there was a fire. And that they're all happening in a really short amount of time where it's like, this obviously has never happened before.
At this point, it'd be like, somebody call an electrical engineer and check the power grid. Everyone's like, shorting out.
Yeah.
The lightning. There's a lot of lightning storms in Florida, though.
True.
But still.
But yeah, just to go from an electrical outlet to the bed, it's like in, 2 cases.
Yeah.
So 15 days later, on September 2nd, 1993, in the Brookridge subdivision, there was another mobile home fire with the victim inside. So another one. So this is the 4th. Sergeant Rivenbark is called to the scene, and in the show I watched, he describes how like he will never forget pulling up to the home that was on fire because the home was Lydia Rydell's, Ruth's best friend.
Oh,
yeah.
what? Oh no.
Yes, the very woman that he had talked to just 15 days prior and consoled her over the loss of her best friend.
No.
So thankfully with Lydia's case, fire officials finally agree, like, there must be a serial arsonist out there, so they're a little more careful with putting out the fire this time in order to help, like, preserve evidence.
That's
Lydia, yeah, so it's like, I don't know how they can be more careful, but I think it's just not, like, full blast, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just more strategic. I have no idea. So, Lydia was found with her arms duct taped together.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So this is getting more as well, more aggressive.
So that's obviously a crime scene. It's not like, okay, even if there's an electrical fire, type of thing, she's not going to bed with her arms duct taped, So Lydia Rydell was 79 years old and had managed a health food store in Philadelphia before moving to Florida.
All of them are just trying to live their best life in the warmth.
And as we know, her and Ruth were best friends. And that's like the one true connection those 2 cases have. That like, they're not connected to the other cases on a personal level like that. But so with all of this and all the similar things, it was clear that Sophia Garrity and Ruth Goldsmith's cases needed to be reopened.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided to reopen them.
About time.
Yeah. It was clear that, like, there is a serial killer on the loose killing little old ladies.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're an easy target. And then there was the use of a fire to help get rid of any evidence. And the community had never experienced this type of violence before. You know, like all these fires and someone going in, and think about the community. It's a lot of retired people.
Yeah. They're all
so they are all
age.
the demographic.
Yeah.
So people were freaked out. So they were changing their locks, buying mace, and even guns. And according to a Desert News article, Bill, a 65-year-old retired power company supervisor who he didn't want his last name used, said, "When I got home last night, my wife had every light in the house on, and she was sitting in a chair with a can of mace. It's a hell of a way to live."
Yeah.
They were just freaked out. And, you know,
it's crazy because it's exactly like you said. They're literally all the person this person is going after. Where some serial killers they only like brunettes, or they only like blondes, or like, you're old and you live in a house that can be lit on fire.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they're scary. They fit the profile.
Anybody could be.
Yeah, so they were all freaked out.
Yeah.
So with the fact that the killer was primarily killing elderly retirees, the killer was named the Granny Killer.
Oh, that's
I know.
Gross and sad.
So apparently there's another killer in Australia that's also named the Granny Killer, but I could cover him another time if I remember. So detectives were receiving hundreds of tips a day, you know, because everyone's freaked out, but none of them led back to their original suspect, Edwin.
Oh, okay.
He was, you know, the one that lived across from Sophia and dated her, well, in the past had dated her granddaughter. And the fires were happening like all around the county, so they couldn't really like pinpoint like a neighborhood. It was just really like 8 miles away and, you know, 10 miles away or whatever. Yeah. So other than the two neighbors, best friends. So one of the tips said to look at a man named Robert McDowell. Now, Robert was 39 years old. He was addicted to crack, had no job, was known to ask elderly people for money. And he was, I guess, obsessed with knives. So, and he had gone to church with his mother multiple times, to the same church as Ruth and Lydia.
Oh, no.
So they were like, well, there's a connection to him to two of the victims. And so detectives performed a search of his house where he lived with his mom and found duct tape.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I have strange. Exactly. I'm like, I have a bunch of duct tape.
Right.
Like, all over. And so when detectives interviewed him, they told him the duct tape that they found at his house matched the duct tape that was around Lydia's arms. But he was like, well, that's not my duct tape. It's my mom's. Like, I live with my mom. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So they didn't have enough to, like, hold him, you know, at this point. But they were trying to, like, you know, oh, the duct tape, it matches. But so Lydia's body was autopsied, and in that autopsy, it revealed that there was pubic hair in her throat.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Ew.
So immediately a DNA sample was collected from the pubic hair. And during this time, that, like I said, they didn't have enough to hold Robert McDowell for Lydia's murder, so they just had to let him go. But they were clear that they were hoping that the DNA was going to match up with McDowell, and they would be able to like link them all and, you know, close it all. Like, this is it. But
of course it doesn't.
Just 24 days later, on September 26, 1993, Alice Daw was found beaten to death in her mobile home in Spring Hill. Alice was 87 years old.
Oh, gosh.
And she just liked to keep to herself. She wasn't like Sophia, who handed out cookies, or like Ruth and Lydia, who were like really involved in their church. She just like kept to herself.
Yeah.
And so detectives were really trying to figure out if like her age and the fact that she lived alone was the only connection that she had to the other cases. And the reason why detectives thought that this case was connected was not only because of her age, was because they found a burn mark on the carpet leading from an electrical outlet to her bed. Just a burn mark.
Like the start?
So this time, the fire burned itself out instead of burning up the house.
Evidence.
So they had a house full of evidence.
Nice.
It didn't burn.
Which is also interesting because that means more than likely they set the fire and took off.
Yes.
Whoever
thinking
is,
like
they're
it's
not,
just gonna
they're
burn
not sitting around because they're
watching
getting
the fire.
bold because this has never happened before. So why would it happen? Oh, okay.
Exactly. So Alice was found deceased in her bed, covered with pillows and a comforter. And during the autopsy...
Oh, like extra tinder to burn with the body.
Yeah, just like light it up because all of that accelerant, and
it would
it's
hold
just
near longer.
and burn the body hotter. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So during the autopsy, pubic hairs were found in her throat.
Ew.
Yeah, just like with Lydia. They were the same color and consistency as the hairs found in Lydia's throat, so they were similar.
Gross,
I know. So yeah. This was a big piece of evidence, but it was not the only piece of evidence that they were able to gather from the scene. There was a palm print on top of Alice's car.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And it was like almost as if someone was trying to climb in or out, and they like put their hand on the top of the car to like brace themselves. So they were like, good, we have fingerprints.
Yeah.
And detectives were also able to identify the accelerant, which was rubbing alcohol.
Oh my gosh.
So that's why it just burned out.
Yeah, it
it's
is.
Not
it really is
super flammable.
No,
yeah.
It evaporates so quickly.
Yes,
with
it
heat.
does. But it's like, I have rubbing alcohol in my house. Like, I'm sure the killer probably didn't have to bring an accelerant to the scene. So it makes you wonder in all the other crime scenes, like, was he just using something he found in the house?
Yeah, whatever
like, was he just using
available.
like a gas can or something, whatever. So yeah, he was using what was available.
You could soak something in hairspray. Like, seriously, there's so many things.
Oh, and imagine how many, like, I remember my grandma had like hairspray because my mom would do her hair every Friday, and she'd do like the big like bump thing.
The
and
big bouffant.
Yeah, the big bouffant. And she had like the hairspray in the bathroom. Yeah. So who knows? But yeah, thankfully this house did not go up in flames, so they had all this evidence. 3 days later, an anonymous tip comes in saying, look at Edwin again. And the reason why is because the person that called in the tip noticed a car with someone fitting Edwin's description down the street from the last murder.
Oh.
So, yeah, so Edwin. A little bit about Edwin, other than the fact that he dated Sophia Garrity's granddaughter, lived across the street. He was a handyman, and he helped his father with stuff around town a lot. He worked a lot. And interestingly, all of the victims had been one of his father's clients.
Oh, no.
And at the time, like, Edwin had a steady girlfriend, and he just appeared to like, oh, I just work, and I got my girlfriend and stuff. But detectives really looked into him and decided to see if the fingerprints found on the car matched him. So remember, they had prints from when he was arrested for the connection to that murder.
Oh, yeah.
So so they had his prints. So it's 1993. It's going to take a little while to get results back. So 7 weeks went by. No more fires. But the results came back that the fingerprints on the car matched Edwin Caprat.
Ooh.
So they knew they had their guy. So detectives went to a judge and got a bird dog order was granted.
Okay.
And what that is, it's allowing detectives to surveil him, so they could put a tracker on him. Yeah.
Stuff. Okay, gotcha.
So because they didn't want to spook him and have him run or whatever,
Right.
they just knew like he's out there killing little old ladies. We need to trail him and make sure we can bring him in without an incident happening or whatever. So they followed him everywhere that he went. They put a tracker on his car, and so they could like visually see everywhere he's going. And the plan was
that's so interesting how that's legal at the same time. It's
well,
so weird.
with probable cause.
Right.
It's like they had his fingerprints matching fingerprints at a scene of a crime.
Yeah.
So their plan was to catch him when he returned home and to then bring him in for questioning. And then during that, search his person for pubic hair, saliva, fingerprints to like verify. And so they're following him around. And that very night, they're like, this is it. When he gets home, we're going to take him in. Edwin goes to a used car lot and trades in his car.
Oh, what a dick.
Yeah. So the detectives that were like trailing him had to go into the used car lot and talk to the guy and like explain what is happening. Don't touch the car. We need to get our tracker.
Oh my gosh.
And what car did he get? Verify.
So we can find it.
Yes. So they were like, great. Now we got to like start all over. And, and Sergeant Rivenbark, he just knew that like there's going to be another victim by the morning. He's trading in his car. This is weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were just thinking, great, we got to start the whole surveillance all over again. We don't know where he is right now. But detectives got very lucky because a police patrol officer just pulled over Edwin Caprat. So Sergeant Rivenbark was called and quickly, went to the location where Edwin was pulled over. And when Sergeant Rivenbark asked him to step out of the car, Edwin simply said, "What took you so long?" So he clearly knew he was caught. What a jerk. Mm-hmm. So detectives did something a little different when interrogating Edwin. Mm-hmm. They decided to line the entire interrogation room with crime scene photos. Oh. Yeah. So he likes his and stuff. They knew it was him. Mm-hmm. And they were hoping that would kind of pressure him into a confession. So even with all the evidence and the crime scene photos around him, he still denied everything. He was like, no, not me. Mm-hmm. But the detectives knew it was him. They just wanted a confession. So they're really laying into him.
It's his last power move because it's all he has left.
Exactly.
That's all he can do is deny.
I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm not going to give you what you want. Yeah. I'm not going to give you a confession. But about an hour and a half into it, Edwin said, "If you let me have a cigarette, I'll tell you what I know." And there's no smoking.
The power of addiction.
Yeah, but there's no smoking allowed in the building. Yeah. But detectives were like, fine, you can have a cigarette, but you have to tell us what you know. And he did. He also said it in great detail what he did. Yeah. And he stated that he raped them, tortured them, and murdered them. Gross. So he confessed to everything. And then he said he trailed an accelerant from the bed to an electrical outlet so that it would look like an electrical fire. So detectives had their confession and their evidence to take it to trial. So obviously, Edwin Caprat was convicted of all the murders and fires. Mm-hmm. He was sentenced to death and was sent to the Florida State Prison's death row. But
oh no.
Just weeks after he was sent to death row, on April 19th, 1995, Edwin Caprat and one other death row inmate were stabbed and killed by two other death row inmates. So he's gone. He died.
Save those taxpayer dollars.
Yep. And so because of his death, all the cases were dropped and closed, and the families were just relieved because he's gone. Done. And so Edwin Mike Caprat was finally gone for good.
Oh my goodness, that's so gross and sad. Yeah. These are always gross and sad.
Yeah, I know. Murder's never pretty. And the fact that it was, can you imagine these ladies and gentlemen, because he died too, living your whole life, working your whole life and getting to retirement and moving to someplace warm, and you are murdered.
Horrifically. It's not even just
and your body is basically scorched, you're not even recognizable. It's awful. But thankfully it was solved. And it's just kind of sad to think if Sophia's case wasn't closed so early and they really did take more time and look into Edwin and connection and whatever, I wonder if the other deaths could have been prevented, or if just at the time, I mean, like I said, there wasn't a lot of evidence at the scene, so there's not a lot for them to go off of. But so he's gone, and all those cases have been solved, obviously, so that's at least a relief. But for the families, answers, gives them answers. So
shower time.
I know. I feel so
I'm
gross.
Sweaty. And
me too.
Let me tell you, we sweat so much during these. It doesn't matter how much research, but a lot of it too is I don't know what she's talking about. So I get anxious because it's sad and it's really gross and
and I'm the one who has to tell it, so I'm anxious about that. And so but anyways, with that, stay crafty
and not crimey.
Bye.